as I reflect back on what happened here in 2020 with the illness and getting COVID and, getting, put under intubation and onto a ventilator and everything, I used to kind of jokingly say CrossFit saved my life. I would say that kind of in jest, like, okay, it gave me something to do. It gave me a stress relief, it gave me focus. It kind of gave me some sort of purpose outside of everything else. But I truly believe after what, myself and my family went through this last year, that CrossFit truly did save my life.
Hello, and welcome to Pursuing Health. I'm Dr. Julie Fouché, family physician and former CrossFit Games athlete. Here, I bring you information and inspiration to help bridge the gap between fitness and medicine and support your journey toward your healthiest self. This episode is one of a series of Pursuing Health stories. Here, I feature the inspiring stories of regular, everyday people who've used lifestyle to overcome some incredible health challenges. This week's story features Darryl Chajon, a 47-year-old CrossFitter who suffered a severe case of COVID-19 last year. He went from being in the best shape of his life, preparing for a competition, to finding himself in the ICU dependent on a ventilator and a dialysis machine in a matter of days. Despite the severity of his illness, though, Darryl and his doctors credit his fitness level for his ability to make an unexpectedly quick and full recovery. Here we talk about Darryl's experience, what it's taught him, as well as how he's recovered to become fitter than ever a year later. Before we dive into the episode, I do want to make it clear that this podcast is for general information only and does not provide medical advice. I recommend that you seek assistance from your personal physician for any health conditions or concerns. All right, well, welcome to Pursuing Health. I'm really excited to be here with Darryl Chajon, who has a really incredible story with COVID, which is not something that we've really talked about here on the podcast. So thank you for joining me. We were just talking about how we met at a CrossFit Level 1 seminar a couple years ago, and you have been an athlete and doing CrossFit for a while. So maybe we can just start there about what sort of your athletic background was and what you were doing to work out leading into coming down with COVID.
Okay. So I actually didn't really get into CrossFit till later in life. It was like 2013, so about 8 years ago. And I started out at CrossFit CLE in Cleveland. I'll never forget, I had a vacation we did in Hawaii right before I started my on-ramp, training. And I look at pictures from then to now and I'm like, oh my God, what a difference.
We all do that, I think.
Exactly. But as I reflect back on what happened here in 2020 with the illness and getting COVID and, getting, put under intubation and onto a ventilator and everything, I used to kind of jokingly say CrossFit saved my life. I would say that kind of in jest, like, okay, it gave me something to do. It gave me a stress relief. It gave me focus. It kind of gave me some sort of purpose outside of everything else. But I truly believe after what, myself and my family went through this last year, that CrossFit truly did save my life. My wife chronicled all of this on her Facebook post to kind of keep all friends and family updated because she just felt overwhelmed with all the calls and inquiries into what was going on with me while I was in the hospital. They put me on a ventilator under intubation. And within the first days, my lungs started reacting. Like within the first 24 hours, my lungs started working favorably, which, the doctors told Claudia this, wasn't normal. They hadn't seen this, but it's good news.
Yeah.
And it was only 6 days. At the time, I think the average, I looked at so many numbers and statistics. I think the average was somewhere like, 13 to 15 days under intubation on a ventilator. And 6 days later, I was out. So, it was interesting.
That's incredible. And incredible too, to look at it from that perspective. I think that it could be easy to look at it from the negative perspective of, being on the ventilator and being on for 6 days, but like looking in comparison, what it may have been like if you didn't have that reserve and that resilience from doing CrossFit and being active.
Absolutely.
So you said you started in 2013. How did you find CrossFit, and how did it become a big part of your life?
So let's see. So started off in college. I was a college athlete, played soccer to Division III school, played football because my fraternity brothers were football players, and, just had that competitive itch and always wanted to be training and being active. And it was something I've done since I was a little kid, just be active. Never a great athlete, just active, and work really hard to make good teams. And then, once college was over, there was that void. You try to figure out what you do. You go to a Globo gym. By the way, I tried to think like I was always a heavier guy, so I tried every diet known to man. It wasn't until, what was it? 2000. So 2005, I started actually doing MMA first. I needed to do something competitive, something moving. And so I ended up training with the MMA team at Strong Style in Independence, Ohio. They've got some really well-known fighters, Stipe Miocic and all these other people. I did that for 4 years. And I basically was getting my butt kicked every night by these guys. I didn't belong there. I was not a fighter. I just liked to train, and I thought, the adrenaline you would get and everything. Well, once I fought once, because my wife gave me the ultimatum. She's like, you get to fight once, and that's it. And so,
and you're done.
And I respected that. As soon as I fought, I was 38 years old. I was a little bit too old to be fighting. I won. It was a great opportunity. And then there was that void again. I wasn't training 5 days a week. I wasn't doing anything. And then a friend of mine who was taking classes at CLE during the day, he says, "Hey, Darryl, you got to come try this thing. You're crazy enough. This stuff really pushes you. It's mental." He goes, "I think you'd like it. I think this is perfect for you." And I'm like, "Mom, looking for something. I need to get something going again." So I fell in love with it. The minute I walked into the gym, I'll never forget the first time, you associate colors, smells, or music or anything. The first thing I heard was just music blaring when I walked in. I'm a huge kind of a music junkie. I just like to listen to music all the time. And I was hooked. And I thought immediately I'd get to jump in and train. And, I went to talk to the coach, and he asked me some questions, and he was like, "Yeah, why don't we start an on-ramp? We're going to work one-on-one, and you got to do this for 30 days. And I'm like, "But I want to start now. Like, I want to jump in." And he's like, "Yeah, no, no." So we set it up. Right way. Exactly. So we did it 2 weeks later because I had a vacation coming up. So, started as soon as I came back, and I fell in love with it instantly. Instantly.
That's great. And so then you had been doing it for about 7 years. And what was your experience like with CrossFit? Were you doing it? Did you ever do it from a competitive standpoint? Was it just sort of a regular part of your workout routine? Did you do it a few days a week, or what was sort of your status leading into 2020?
Okay. Into 2020 was actually, so I just started focused. I had this goal, I think a lot of CrossFit athletes do this at some point in time in their career, but I was like, I want to see if I can be a little bit more competitive. I wonder if I can make the games. I wonder if I can push myself and get to some of these higher level events, Wadapalooza, Granite Games, things to that nature. And so I started training a little bit more. So ramping up to 2020, I was following CompTrain programming. I was training about 3 hours a day, maybe 3 days a week, because it was a lot for me. I was a 47-year-old, 47-year-old athlete, and with all the injuries I've had, it was just, I couldn't do it all the time. And so I was committed, but I wasn't committed, if that makes sense. But things were getting better. I think I competed in 2019. So leading up to 2020, I did the online qualifier for Wadapalooza. And I came in like 98th place, and I was like, okay, that's respectable. Kind of gave me a benchmark. Okay, this is where you're going from, and moving towards. And so I was getting really strong at the end of 2019. My numbers were ridiculous. Like, at my age, to be able to put up 275 on a split jerk,
Wow.
Clean and jerk, my snatch, I got it up to 205.
Nice.
But I was starting to have issues, lower back pains because my movement patterns were incorrect. And I worked with a therapist every week. So we were always just trying to work through this, different exercises. He'd do some body work. And then, so glad to say now, fast forward a couple years later, I don't have any of those body issues, and I'm really focused on mobility, the strengthening, the prehab type stuff. And so it's working really well.
That's great.
But, then I got hit with the illness. It was March 24th when I started getting sick. And what was funny was, we were looking forward to, me and my training partners and my coach were looking forward to the Granite Games qualifier, which I think was in April of last year, was supposed to be. And, we're like, well, maybe you might make it. I mean, you're really starting to come along. And,
things are looking good. So when did you what were your first symptoms, or when did you first start to think that you weren't feeling well?
So it was, these dates are vivid after going through this so many times, but Tuesday, March 24th was the day that I got the first symptoms. And at first it was fatigue. So that day I was scheduled, we had 5 Shih Tzus, and I was scheduled to take them to the groomer that day.
Oh, wow. That requires a lot of energy.
So I overslept. My wife called me. It was like, and I don't do that. It was like 9:30, 10 o'clock. I was supposed to have taken them at 9. And she's like, hey, you missed the appointment for the dogs. And I was like, I did. And I was just out of it. And I was like, I don't feel well. And we knew what was going on with all the news and everything about the pandemic.
Yeah.
I'm like, I just don't feel well. And so we canceled the appointment and canceled some other important things. Like I was supposed to take care of her grandmother that next day. And she had just gotten out of Cleveland Clinic with pneumonia.
Oh, wow.
And she's in her 80s. So we kind of helped, everybody signed up to do a day to take care of her. And so we made the decision right there. We don't know what this is. I don't feel right.
Yeah.
Let's not, go into this. But it started off just as fatigue, a slight cough. And then, the fever started, and the breathing issues were starting to occur, later in the week, so to speak.
And when did you start to feel like, I don't know if you had contact with your doctors while you're still at home, but when did you start to feel like, okay, things are not going in the right direction. I think I need to go into the hospital?
We contacted our family physician, and everything at that point, was via these Zoom meetings, these virtual, visits. No one was seeing anyone, especially at my age. I'm not over 60. You remember those days where, okay, you can't get tested unless you're over 60.
Right. You couldn't even get a test, probably.
Conditions. Right. Yeah. So we called. They said, just take, the typical medications. I think they prescribed a Z-Pak, if I'm not mistaken. But things weren't going well. I mean, it was getting worse. And so my wife decided to take me to the hospital that Sunday, the emergency room here in Lakewood.
And that was how long after you had started? That was Tuesday to Sunday. So, okay. So
Tuesday to Sunday. Yep. And, they tested me for the flu for, they said I was starting to get slight pneumonia, but the chest looked clear. Like, okay, that made no sense. But they said, we're going to send you tomorrow to get tested. So I had an order. They wrote an order, and then I went to Walker Garage downtown that Monday. That was the 31st. Or Monday, I'm sorry, the 30th, to get tested. And that was a whole interesting experience, just driving into that garage.
Drive-through testing,
white suits, it was something out of a movie, like Outbreak,
Right.
And with the screens telling you stop here, call this number, then you drive up to the next screen. And, I got tested the 30th, and then it was Tuesday, the 31st, that the results came back positive.
And what were your first thoughts or reactions when you realized that the results were positive?
They weren't good. They weren't good, just because everything was so negative.
Yeah. And this is also so early in the pandemic, right? So there's so much that we don't know. I remember that in March, the tensions were just high all around.
Yeah. And it was constantly on the news, and it was all negative. And it was just like, oh Lord, I'm sick. Great. And that evening, I don't know, part of it, looking back, I was struggling pretty bad, especially that evening with breathing. And that's where Claudia took me to the emergency room at Fairview. But I don't know. I think back to it and I'm like, could part of that been induced by the anxiety? You know,
not a good combination, not being able to breathe and being under stress. It's a tough one.
So, so that evening, the 31st is when I was admitted to Fairview Hospital.
Okay. And what do you remember from your experience in the hospital?
Traumatizing.
Yeah.
Brutal. The first couple of days, and I sent you a picture, one of the pictures where I just took, my wife wanted to see, what do you look like? What's going on? And I took a picture of myself with all the leads on my chest and everything. And basically doing it, being alone. So I could have no visitors. It was just, you remember that time where no one could come see you. So, it was definitely interesting. And then it led up to, it was just a couple days, that I was in there before I had to be taken in to ICU. And that was an interesting situation because Julie, my blood oxygen levels got near 80. And some alarms went off in the room. And the next thing I know, there's 5 people in the room, like that quick. And it was nurses and doctors. Yeah. And I didn't know what was going on. And they're like, do you have your phone? And I'm like, yeah, well, we're going to need you to call your wife, because we had talked about some of this stuff. We need to get her on the phone. We got to take you to the ICU and put you under intubation now. And I'm like, okay. And, I'm texting my wife at this time. I'm like, hey, I'm about to call you, I'm with the doctors. And so all I remember is they're running because they're on one side of the hospital and ICU's on the other side at Fairview. And they're running me on the bed. Literally running down the hallway. And we dial my wife's number and they're holding the phone and they ask the question, do you give your wife, Claudia, permission to make any decisions for you while you are under intubation?
Wow.
And that's where it hit. And I was just like, yeah, what am I going to say? No.
Right.
So I'm like,
that makes it real. What's happening right now?
Right. And, and she asked me, she was worried at that point. She was freaking out. She's like, honey, are you okay? How do you feel? And I'm like, I'm okay. This is going to give me the rest I need. I said, I'll be back, and I don't remember anything after that. I don't remember getting there. At ICU, I don't remember anything until I was woken up.
Wow. That's really scary and just highlights too this whole time of how, the added impact of the unknown and not being able to have your family members there with you. There's just so much extra, being in the hospital and being sick on its own is incredibly stressful and scary. But then with everything around the pandemic, it just makes it a lot harder. Wow. So then you went to the ICU, you were intubated for 6 days. And talk about, you said obviously that, your team was surprised by how quickly you were able to come off the ventilator. What do you remember when you first kind of woke up or came to after that?
That's a great one. So I wake up to a doctor in the that I remember. This is the first thing I remember, and he was like, "Hi, Darryl, I'm Dr. So-and-so. I'm here to take out the dialysis line." I was like, "What?"
You're like, "What?"
He goes, "We had to put you on dialysis while you were under. Your kidneys were starting to fail." He goes, "They still aren't working, but you're at your age. We're pretty comfortable. So they had to run one more. I guess they ran one more cycle that day on me while I was still in and out." And he goes, "So I'm going to pull the line out," and they went in through my femoral artery because they tried to go in through my neck and it clotted. So they ended up having to go through the artery. And when he pulled that line, oh my God.
That was a surprise.
I thought I was under painkillers and everything. Oh my, what a pain.
Wow.
It was and I can take pain. It was unreal. And then it proceeded to be almost 2 hours, Julie, before they could get the bleeding to stop, to get it to clot. They said the doctor sits there with his hands on the pressure.
Yeah.
It took him 45 minutes. At first he told me it'll be just a few minutes. And a CrossFit or a clock watcher, just sitting there watching
You're counting
the
down the
clock. And I'm like,
seconds.
yeah, I'm like, okay, it's been 15. How much longer, doc? And he's like, oh, just a couple more minutes. And 45 minutes later, he calls in this nurse from the hallway, and he's like, I'm getting tired. I need you to put pressure on this. And I'm going, holy hell, like he's getting tired. What's going on here? I could barely talk at that point. I mean, I was in just out of it. No strength at that point. And so yeah, they got it under control. I ended up having what they put a sandbag on you, like a brick wrapped in like pillowcases. Yeah. So it was like I think they put like a 20-pound on there. And then I was even afraid to move, like the little bit that I can move or adjust.
Right. You don't want to move it out of the way.
Right. Right. So yeah, that was interesting because during that whole time, like I was in so much pain as they're pushing. My eyes were closed. I remember I was stroking the nurse's back, the male nurse in the room, and by mistake, my hand went down further than it should have.
Oh no!
And he goes, it was great. I mean, he said to me, he goes, "Whoa, Darryl, I don't go that way." And I was like, "I'm sorry." Like I felt like the biggest idiot. I'm like, "I'm sorry. I'm just trying to grab and hold pressure. Like when you're in pain, you just clench.
You need to hold on to something.
I need to hold on to something."
That's funny.
Yeah.
Wow. So as you started to kind of come to and realize everything that had happened and find out more information and talk to your wife, what were some of the things that happened during that time, and what was your state when you woke up?
So when I woke up, and that was Good Friday that I was actually coming to. So it was that Easter weekend last year, and I think one point I barely got to talk to Claudia. They have those little remotes hanging on their neck or like a phone, and they can patch somebody through. And she asked me to say something, and I could barely talk. Like I was just like, you can't. Yeah. And that feeling of helplessness for the first, whatever half day, because I did get taken out of ICU the next day, Saturday. But I was determined. Like I kept asking the nurses, I need to move. I was telling them I need to go walk. And they're like, you can't walk right now. He's like, why don't you start by moving your legs, bring one leg up. And I'm like, no, I need to walk. And they were like, I think I drove the poor nurses crazy that evening. But yeah, I just kept moving. Sleep. I couldn't sleep there, Julie. That was one thing. So from the time they woke me up till I ended up leaving the hospital Monday, the day after Easter, I slept 25 minutes total.
Wow.
In that time frame. I couldn't relax. I was still anxious. Yes, I was recovering. I wasn't eating. The food tasted terrible. It wasn't the food that tasted terrible. It was just something with me that I couldn't eat the food.
Well, the hospital food is not great to begin with. Yeah, I'll give you that.
Yeah. So, they took me out Saturday. I was in a wheelchair still because I couldn't walk. And then they took me to the room, in another wing of the hospital. And that's when I was just like, I was determined. I'm going home, I'm going home real soon. And first they need to see me walk. So I was pushing that. And, they brought me a walker. And I was like, what do I need that for? And the nurse starts laughing at me. She's like, laughing with me, not at me. And goes,
you're going to want it.
You need this. And it's like, no, I don't. But yeah, I mean, that first time just getting up out of the bed, moving onto the walker, and I made it 2.5 feet to the recliner and collapsed into the recliner.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was brutal. And that only evening in ICU, just seeing the nurses and doctors, the stress that they were under, and be able to see the window into the hallway, and just watching them running up and down the hallway. It seemed like, I'm probably exaggerating here, but like it seemed like every half hour to hour, there was another something going on, where people were just running down the hallway, and I'm going, oh my God, what's going on?
Yeah. Wow. So once you finally went home, obviously this is your body's been through tons of physical stress, but also a lot of psychological stress with, being there alone and kind of starting to understand everything that just happened. So what was it like for you then, the recovery process once you got home?
I thought it would be easy. First off, I was like, oh, okay, I'm going home. I'll be able to rest.
I'm home. Yeah.
No, the first, I'll remember the first day I tried to go to sleep just on my back, laid in bed. And I think I woke up within like 15 minutes, and my wife's next to me in bed, and I just start screaming in a panic, like, where am I? Where am I? What day is it? You know? And I'm like, I see her, and I just start, like patting her on the back, like, what time is it? Where are we at? Like, just a panic. And so I was sleeping the first, until, I came home the Monday the 13th, and it wasn't until I looked at my numbers here, the 26th of April, because I was tracking my sleep every day. I didn't sleep more than 4 hours for the first couple weeks. Then I started sleeping 4 to 6 hours. But yeah, sleep was hard because there was an anxiety that I wouldn't wake up. There was an anxiety that I wouldn't be able to breathe. Being at home was great because I had my environment. I was able to relax at home. My wife took the first week off when she was home with me. She was going to take a couple weeks, and I was like, I'm good. You're okay. We did walks. We lived near the metro parks, a quarter mile from the metro park. So we would walk from our house down to the metro parks and do walks. That was interesting because walks alone were hard. I mean, just my nervous system and balance, and we'd go off the path into the, little trails, and just climbing over a log or anything was a challenge for me.
Yeah. A big difference from doing your CrossFit workouts.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can go from doing all this crazy stuff and, being fit to, oh my, I can barely walk, and don't take this for granted. Right.
Yeah.
But what made it a little bit more stressful and frustrating too. So my coach calls me, one of my CrossFit coaches, and says, hey, Darryl, he had been doing Murph every day for a year. And on Memorial Day, he was going to do 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
He was like, I want you to come do one with me. And I laughed. I was like, Phil, I can't even run yet. I said, I can't do a push-up. I don't even think I could do a pull-up. And he goes, we got time. He goes, we can modify everything. If you got to walk, you walk. And I'm like, yeah, that's true. So I had a goal in mind, something, to kind of drive me to get ready for.
Yeah.
So little by little, I did my rehab, working with my physical therapist, working with the team from the clinic. And I pushed harder than they would have liked, but I also did it where I knew I wasn't hurting, if my lungs would hurt, if anything hurt, stop. But no, I was okay. It was just fatiguing and building up my cardio and strength back.
So how long did it take for you to start to feel like you were yourself, like you could go back to the gym and do any kind of workout?
Probably like, I tried doing stuff here, and it wasn't going well. It was all slow. I didn't have the strength. It was middle of June where I started attempting to start training again a little bit more. And then, I think, so what's funny here is, this is how dumb too I can be at times. I'm a little bit aggressive and overly optimistic and pushing, but there was a qualifier, a competition that came out in August 12th, the Legends Masters qualifier. And so I told the guys I trained with, and my coach, I'm like, I want to try to do this. And they're like, okay, perfect. We're with you. But there was a lot of doubt, what I could do, how far I could get, any of that. And I did it. And that, Julie, the first workout was announced, or whatever, August 12th, I think it was. That was the first time I felt alive again, which is kind of scary and sad to say, just from
That's a long time.
A fitness level, and just feeling myself, because part of me is pushing. It's always being active. It's always pushing.
Yeah.
And that, like, it made, I remember commenting to one of the guys, I'm like, I feel alive again.
Wow. That's great. That's great. Getting back in that environment, but also I think you said you like to push, but doing it in a way that was safe, where you, like you said, if things started to hurt, or if you're breathing, your lungs started to hurt, you were mindful of that. Where do you have any lingering symptoms or effects from COVID now, where I guess, almost coming up on a year later.
Right. No, not noticeable that I can, that I can tell. I do I pace myself a little bit more on workouts or whatnot, maybe. So I have had instances over the last, call it 6 months where I coughed up mucus plugs.
Okay.
And they told me that that's normal. I talked to my doctor about that. I guess, my lungs were coated with whatever. I mean, I was spitting that up when I was out of ICU, when I first came out in ICU. So yeah, but no, strength wise, I'm almost back to where I was.
That's great.
And cardio wise, I mean, I'm faster. It's kind of scary to say I couldn't do bar muscle ups before, and I can do them now. I'm stringing chest to bar together. I'm handstand walking. Those are things I couldn't do before.
Good for you. That's amazing. Looking back on the whole journey, what are some of the things that you think you've learned from it, or the ways that maybe it's made you stronger?
I mean, what I've learned is really to focus on. I mean, a couple of things that I started focusing on was nutrition too. Right before I got sick, I had signed up with a nutritionist, and it's been now, it'll be 2.5 years that I'm doing it. And I've struggled. That's something I've always struggled with, is eating. So, but it's gotten better. It's gotten easier. It's getting more routine. That to me is important. It's like, okay, look, your body's like a machine. And if you don't fuel it properly, I don't know if I would have made it, because that week in intubation, I lost 30 pounds. And that first week at home, by the way, I was eating and talking to my nutritionist. She said, we're not monitoring macros. Just make sure you get at least 200 grams of protein a day. Yeah. That first week I was eating about 10,000 calories, and I still lost 10 more pounds that first week at home.
Wow. Yeah. Your body's working in overdrive. Wow. Okay. Well, anything else, any other reflections that you want to share about your experience that you think would be helpful for other people to hear?
Yeah. When things seem, I guess, despair, you're in despair, things are all rough. I remember hearing this from a mentor years ago, a guy that I really look up to, and he just always used to tell me, hey, this too shall pass. This too shall pass. So I literally told myself that in the hospital, in the ICU unit, every day, 2 times a day. And, don't take anything for granted and keep pushing. I mean, so, they gave me a plan. They're like, here, safe plan. You work on this, you'll get better. I pushed a little bit more, and it was because I had that desire to be not just back to normal, but better, Julie. I made the decision. I'm like, I'm going to be better than what I was before I got sick.
Good for you. And that attitude is so important, and that being able to tell yourself that and remind yourself, that this is going to pass is so important, because I think it's hard when you're in those moments where it seems like things are not going well, or you don't have the people around you who can tell you that. I mean, I think that, CrossFit obviously had a huge impact in terms of helping you be resilient for it, but also the mental attitude. And a lot of that comes hand in hand as well.
Right. Absolutely. That's great.
Well, I want to wrap up with 3 questions I ask everyone at the end of the podcast. So the first one is, what are the 3 things that you do on a regular basis that have the biggest positive impact on your health?
First would be being grateful, the gratitude part. Every day. There's many times during the day where I'm just thankful for where I'm at and what I'm doing, and physically that I'm here. The second thing is something, physically to do every day, whether it's, training day or not a training day. On the non-training days, I got to move. Your body needs to move. So even if it's stretching, even if it's a walk, whatever it might be, do something active. So for me, it's activity levels. And then the other thing that I struggle with all the time, but I'm mindful of it, and I try to work on it every day, is my nutrition. It's still, I'm a hard head when it comes to nutrition.
It's always a work in progress.
Right.
But that's great. What about, that could maybe be the answer for the next question, but what's something that you're working on, or something you think would have a big impact on your health, but you haven't implemented it yet?
more than anything, the nutrition piece. If I could get that down better, it would only help me, get to where I want to go, and not just from my objectives and goals in CrossFit, but physically. Worst case scenario, if I don't obtain my goal of getting to the games, what's going to happen? I probably will be a lot fitter than I was, 15, 20 years ago.
That's a great way to think about it. Yeah.
So
it's
we're
a win-win.
Just question. Exactly.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen?
Right. That's so true. What tends to get in your way the most with nutrition? Like when you're really on, and you're doing well, what's the difference between that and when you're maybe struggling with some of the nutrition stuff?
Emotional.
Yeah.
Emotions. It seems like, I ride high and I ride low. I'm very compulsive, obsessive types that, I get really involved in everything. And I also, I fluctuate with emotions. And totally. I think that challenges me at times,
Definitely.
When,
I think a lot of people can relate to that for sure, myself included. All right. Last question is, what does a healthy life look like to you, Darryl?
Healthy life look like to me, to be happy. True to me, I think I've thought about this quite a bit in the last year. To be really happy, it's, do you love what you do? Do you have people around you that you can love and share that love with and that passion? And are you being a good person?
That's beautiful. The secret to life. I love it. That's great. Well, I love, I'm so grateful for you sharing your story and your perspective here. And I think it's such a great example for, as we met at the level 1 and people who have taken the level 1 have seen the Sickness-Wellness-Fitness continuum that I love from CrossFit. This is just such a great example of that, because no matter what happens, life is going to throw challenges our way, whether it's COVID, whether it's having an injury or a car accident or anything else. And the more resilience we can build and the more we can be on that fit side of the continuum, the easier we're going to bounce back. And obviously you had a big challenge in front of you. It wasn't, it still took a while to get back to better than where you were before, but because of that buffer that you had built from doing CrossFit for so many years before, I'm sure you did much better. Who knows where you would be right now if you hadn't been doing CrossFit. Maybe you would still be having symptoms. Maybe you would still, or not quite back to yourself. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Darryl.
Okay. Thank you, Julie.
Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you or someone you know has a story to share on a future episode of Pursuing Health, please write me at info@pursuing-health.com. If you enjoy listening to the podcast, please also consider subscribing and giving it a 5-star rating on iTunes. It really does help to get the word out to more people.